I'm always, somebody comes up with something new. It's, okay, tell me about that.
Somebody pointed out too that you go to the mental institution, it says a lot of happy people in there.
That's right.
Not a care in the world.
You did hear about him, had black eye, and everybody's asking him how he got it. And he said, well, I was walking by this big fence, and on the other side, all these people were cheering. And there was a little knock over the fence. So I put my eye up against it to see what they're cheering about. Somebody poked me in the eye, and they started cheering, number 96, yay! Oh boy. So, now you know.
Now I'm voting. Hello.
Come on. How are you? That's good. Oh, okay. They followed you in.
I was already there before I got there.
Get out and walk around, look what places to do. Oh, okay.
I've got some newer batteries. They actually should last a little longer than these.
I changed them Wednesday.
Okay, yeah, okay, that's right, you did. So we should be good for today. But another few weeks, another month or so, we may just toss all four of these
Yeah.
and move on to new ones.
I've got a Bagley tester down in the cabinet. Good morning, how are you?
Good morning. Wow,
Morning.
we're all sheep today. None of the goats are here. We can talk about goats all we want. We're looking at the miracles that Jesus did, and we're in John chapter 6. Walking on the water. Anybody try it this week? Well, this is a little more serious, walking on water. I mean, like walking from here to Africa, or so some deep water. Good morning. We're all anticipating who will sit with the sheep and who will sit with the goats. And so far, the goats haven't got anybody. Looking at the miracles of Jesus, the walking on the water, John chapter 6. Pick up there in verse 16. When evening came, the disciples went down to the sea. And Jesus has gone off, and Jesus does this several times. That's mentioned. No telling how many other times he went off and took time alone, time to pray. We all run into the need for a little bit of alone time, especially when you're spending way too much time with those ugly people at work, and you need to get away from them. You need to go somewhere and just have a bit of time by yourself. It's interesting that Jesus did that. Oh, Sarah's going to sit with the sheep too. So we got all sheep today. Now, there was an assignment last week. Everybody remembers their assignment. The miracle of Jesus walking on the water is only half of what the miracle is that John records here. Do you remember the other half? Anybody know what the other half of his miracle was?
Calm storm?
Well, that kind of goes along with it,
Got Peter.
but there's even more.
They instantly got to the shore.
Okay. Charles, I'll put you to work this morning. You want to pass these around? Lou's already got one. So. You know how it is. The teacher's pet always.
That or you forget me half the time.
Either one.
And I have to flag down somebody.
The disciples get into the boat. They start to cross the sea to Capernaum. It's already dark. And Jesus had not met them, so it's dark and they're leaving to start heading across the sea. And the sea begins to be stirred up. A strong wind was blowing. By the way, it happens all the time. In fact, I forget what the name is, but the locals have a couple of different names for it. When the windstorms blow up off the Mediterranean and across the Sea of Galilee, all kind of thing that all the fishermen would know about. So they're used to it. The strong wind is blowing, and now they have rowed about 3 or 4 miles. Now this is where the handy-dandy picture, Sea of Galilee from space, comes in. The area they're going from is over here, and they're going across nearly the widest part of the lake there. So you can see they've got quite a ways to go. Here's the fun part. It says that they had rowed about 3 or 4 miles. Sea of Galilee is about 8 miles wide at that point. It's about 13 miles long. 8 miles, and you've rowed 3 to 4 miles. So they've got a long night ahead of them, don't they? To finish making it home. Jesus comes to them walking on the sea and draws near to the boat. They're frightened. He tells them, "It is I, do not be afraid." And you'll notice John gives a very condensed account of this. The other Gospels, and again written years before to people that knew nothing about Jesus basically, or Christ, the Christ or the church or anything. So John is not going to explain details that basically all Christians know. So he leaves out the details of them seeing Jesus at a distance, being afraid, Peter offering to walk on the water and sinking. By the way, you remember the one thing that Peter did right when he began to sink?
Called after Jesus.
He looked to Jesus. And when you think about it, just a minute, just think about that. He's in a professional fishing business with Andrew, James, and John. How many times have they gotten into trouble over the years in storms on the Sea of Galilee? They're used to this. Well, maybe not used to it, but they've been through it a lot.
They know what to do.
And these are the guys that do know what to do. So why doesn't Peter turn around and look at them? "Hey, John, throw me the life preserver, come over here and help me." And instead, he looks to Jesus. And, I've heard complete sermons on that. That's a pretty good sermon, isn't it? Just in itself. Looking the right way when you're in trouble. Not looking back to your friends, no matter how good and helpful they may be, look to Jesus. Well, Jesus draws near to the boat. They're frightened. Tells them, "It's I, do not be afraid." And look at verse 21. John must have had a bit of English blood in him. He likes understated humor. Jokes that just pass right over most people's head. He says, "So they were willing to receive him into the boat." Think about that a minute. You know the rest of the account. He's bringing Peter with him, and okay, we're willing to accept you into the boat. John, John's obviously English with that sense of humor. But notice the last part of verse 21. They're 3 to 4 miles into a journey that is some 8 miles, and immediately, instantly, the boat was at the land to which they were going. Anybody got a motorboat that, I'll pick on Johnny. Will your boat do 4 miles in about that long? Not going to happen, is it? There's not anything out there. I don't care what you are. Speedboat, you know, they're not going to do 3, 4, 5 miles instantaneously. So, kind of the extra part of the miracle there. Not only does he calm the storm, and yes, the other gospel writers all make a bigger deal of that. But in effect, there become 3 miracles, if you add them all up, that Jesus does. He walks on the water, he calms the storm, and instantly they're 4 miles away. And again, most commercial fishermen, professional sailors are pretty cognizant about things like that. You suppose they misjudge the distance? Not a chance. Not a chance. So John brings this up, a little point that none of the other gospel accounts really point to. But it's interesting. Why would John think of that? He was there. He was there that night. We don't know for certain whether Matthew was there. Mark's gospel, probably a lot of it comes from Peter. But Peter and Mark are not necessarily trying to get all the details in. That's obvious from Mark's gospel, the Reader's Digest condensed version of the gospel. But Luke, of course, checking his sources, but you can't get everything in. Which is the longest gospel? Luke is the longest gospel. He includes more information about more different things than any of the other writers, and he still leaves out some. And of course, John explains that again, that reminder at the end of the gospel when John sums up, he says, there were a lot of other things that Jesus said and did. I just don't have time to go into all of them. By the way, since we're going through John 6 this morning in the sermon, I'll give you a little free one. Take a look down at verse 26, is one we sometimes miss. Why were many of the crowds really following Jesus after he fed them? Jesus is pretty insulting, isn't he?
Feed them once, and they'll come back.
They were there for the food.
We're here for you to perform. And honestly, how many times do we do that to Jesus ourselves? You know, I'm the lion tamer. I get my whip out and my chair out and crack the whip. And Jesus, you perform for me. And you know, and virtually all of God's people have been guilty of that at one time or another. David, in a number of his Psalms, you know, Lord, why are you doing this to me? Lord, help me. But isn't that really a sense of, God, you perform for me? You've helped me before, you help me now. And sometimes we even are so blunt as to state it, if you don't help me, Lord, then I won't believe in you. That's getting pretty pathetic, isn't it? I wonder, can you picture Peter? Traditionally, from the 2nd century, they say he was crucified, and when he was offered the terms of his crucifixion, he said, oh, I don't deserve to die like my Savior did, and they crucified him upside down. As he's dying on that cross, do you suppose he says, "Oh, Jesus, if you just get me out of this one, I'll really believe in you"? No. Sometimes God's answer is just going to be, this is the end. And that's a hard one for us to remember. We talk about it at funerals. We talk about it sometimes to each other years later. Oh, they're in a better place. That's right. Going home shouldn't really be the bad thing. Now, granted, if you've done wrong and failed to believe in God or serve Him all your life, that might be a good time to do a little pleading. But on the other hand, sometimes God says, well, it's too late. And if you don't think that's really fair, and a lot of times we don't, try explaining that to the policeman the next time you're caught for doing 90 down the freeway. Or passing the school bus with the stop sign out. And you tell him, oh, well, I didn't see it, or I'll do better next time. And he says, well, good. And maybe this fine will remind you to do better next time. Sometimes God is not, God's not there as a fairy godmother, as a Father Christmas, Santa Claus. Got to get my right language going here. We were discussing the ladies' tea in there. Ladies are not having a tea, they're having a high tea. If you have all that food, if you're serving tea, it's simply a cup of tea and a biscuit. No, not a scone, not a big fancy biscuit, a cookie is what you silly Americans call it. So next time you go to the store, you be sure and ask them where the chocolate chip biscuits are. And just amuse the whole store staff there looking for chocolate biscuits. Terminology, it's different. Make sure that our terminology to God is not just treating Him like He's the one giving us things and we want more and more and more. And honestly, that's kind of a hard lesson. I don't know for any of the rest of you, but it's kind of a hard thing to remember, isn't it? Okay, next miracle that Jesus does. Healing the blind man, chapter 9. As Jesus passed by, he saw a blind man from birth. Okay, how long has this person been blind? All his life. He has never seen. And here's one, had a book by an eye doctor, surgeon, years ago, and he was talking about if you take a child or an adult that has never seen at all in their lives, and he had several examples of adults had never seen anything in their lives, had worked their entire lives as blind people, with a cane tapping around, feeling for things, and was able to restore their sight or give them sight by surgery. Here was the interesting part of his comment. He said, 9 times out of 10, they will come back and tell me as much as 2 or 3 years later, I really wish I was still blind. First thing, from the medical side of it, is when you give sight to someone like that, if you've ever looked at lenses and how things happen, if you look through a telescope up at the stars, and then you happen to turn around and look at something down here on Earth, what happens? A telescope inverts the image. Binoculars have a fancy little prism in them that turns the image back the right way. But a simple lens system will give you an upside down view of things. If you're looking at the moon, you don't really care too much. though it is a bit confusing when the directions say left and right, or from where you are, you'll find this. But the image that your eye delivers to the brain is upside down. So all of you people, and you're looking at me, all of us are hanging from the roof. Remember as a kid looking, turning over and looking upside down at everything and laughing about it and how funny it looked? If y'all didn't do that, y'all were not normal as kids. It's one of those fun things to do as kids. And isn't it funny? Everybody's hanging from the roof. It's only in the brain that image is turned over and all the added detail begins to make sense, the way we see the world. To a person who is born blind, when they are given sight as an adult, what usually happens is they tend to walk into things that they would never walk into. They'll run into the door. They'll walk into the wall. They'll walk into the pew. They can't figure out how things really work from their visual picture of it. Their brain has built up a different picture without the use of their eyes. And remember the most common complaint. They would rather be blind, and some significant percentage of those that recover their sight as adults that had never seen before, something like 40-50% of it, never learn to turn the image right side up. So they will, for the rest of their lives, see everybody hanging from the roof. And they'll just kind of learn to navigate through that. Now we begin to see a little bit when Jesus heals blind people. It's commonly talked about that not a one of them comes back and says, "Oh Lord, I'd like to be blind again. I can't stand seeing everybody upside down." So again, miracles are really not just, nice surgery. It's a lot of things that make connections in the brain. On the other hand, consider who Jesus really is. How would he know how to make all those other connections in the brain and the nerves and everything else? He's the designer. He's the one that built the first model. He's the one that built us. This man is blind from birth, and the disciples have a great question for him. And it's a pretty good question. How many times has Jesus told people when he healed them to go and sin no more? A lot. Remember the man that he let through the roof? By the way, if we all go over to Johnny's house and somebody cuts a hole in the roof to let somebody down, he's going to be a little put out, especially the next time it rains, huh? They open up a section of the roof to let this man down into the house where Jesus is. And you remember that Jesus told him not only take up his bed and walk, but go and sin no more. He never discusses what the sin was. By the way, there's another great lesson, isn't it? When we ask God for forgiveness, do you suppose he has a questionnaire that says, well, okay, you list all the things you've done wrong, and tell me how bad they really were, and you need to explain yourself to me? Aren't you glad that's not the way it is? And I'm going to tell one of those stories. Years ago, in a congregation far, far away, you wouldn't know the people. In fact, most of them are dead now. But we had a lady come forward and confess sin. Her husband had run off with another woman, and her husband run off with another woman and left her and her two kids to raise on her own. And she said, I feel like somehow I have some sin in this. She said, I tried my best, I did everything I could, but I still feel I need forgiveness. and encouragement and helping from her brethren. Okay, congregation, if someone comes with that attitude, how should we react? Reach out to them and help. Encourage them. One lady that night went to one of the elders and said, I don't believe she confessed everything. That woman is wicked for her husband to leave her, and I think the elders should really reject her. Now, for what opinions are worth, and I've been there as an elder, and I know it's not popular, but you know what? That elder should have said to that woman, you're the one that needs to repent. Your sins are far worse than hers. Can't say a terrible thing like that, can you? Sometimes we need to. Maybe that's why elders and preachers are not very popular. Because sometimes they just come out and say, hey, this needs to be said. Forgiveness. We like the blame game. And the apostles, the disciples, asked Jesus, says, Rabbi, who sinned? And we have a list here. This man, is he blind from birth because of some evil sin that he has done? Or his parents, maybe his parents committed some sin. That he would be born blind. Look at Jesus' answer. John 9, verse 3. It was neither that this man sinned, nor his parents, but it was so that the works, the power, literally, of God might be displayed in him. By the way, just to be fair, do you suppose God sometimes, the things that we pray for, pick on a guy. I know a guy that requested multiple times of the Lord to remove this thorn in the flesh. Now you know who it was. And you remember what God told him? My grace is sufficient for you. You've got enough. You've got all you need. Get busy, quit complaining, get back to work. You know, sometimes that's the answer from God. Say, oh, God, I've got these problems. You know, isn't this terrible? I always wanted a body like Arnold Schwarzenegger. I never got one. Maybe that's not the problem. Maybe the problem is accepting what you've got and going on to serve the Lord. That's exactly what Paul was told. And in this case, suppose this man had never encountered. How many other blind people were there in the Greco-Roman Empire, in the world, that never came in contact with Jesus? How many of them would later on become Christians? I have known people blind. Preacher that went blind as an adult out in California. When I was working for the fire department, we were trying to hire a man full-time for the congregation before we left, and the congregation hired him. He worked so, can you imagine how hard it is to prepare a sermon when you're blind? He had tapes of the Bible and he would play them. He would have his wife help him and read to him. And the only reason he didn't stay any longer was he and his wife decided they wanted to go into mission work and work somewhere else. Wow. Maybe the problem is not blindness or whatever ails us. Maybe the problem is the willingness to work. Get out there and do the job. Or as we might tell each other, quit whining and get busy. Jesus answers, verse 3, it was neither that this man sinned nor his parents, but it was so that the works of God might be displayed in him. We must do the work of God, of the one who sent me, as long as it is day. For the night is coming when no man can work. While I am in the world, I am the light of the world. So Jesus, that's a powerful sermon that Jesus just gave to the disciples, isn't it? Guys, get busy. I won't pick on Johnny anymore after this one, but we were discussing some people that were doing some work over here a few days ago, and Johnny just comes in shaking. He said, these guys do more resting than they do working. I could get it. An old man could get in there and do that job quicker than they were. How many times have you caught behind the work truck going down the road, out on the interstate, and he's doing 25 miles an hour? You feel like you could push him faster than that. Probably could. My favorite saying is, he's being paid by the hour. And I just go on around him, come on. Jesus says, guys, we've got to work, and we've got a fixed amount of time to do it. Get busy. Get the job done. Verse 6, when Jesus said this, and my wife is sitting up here about to fall off the pew. There's a Christian comedian. He says, can you picture this from the disciples, from this man's friends' point of view? Jesus spits on the ground. There's another man that's unable to speak, and Jesus spits in his mouth. Oh, gross, yuck. And it's easy to see that way and not realize what's going on. Go back to the first chapter of John and the first few verses. Who is this Jesus? And what did he do? What did he have to do with creation? Everything. He's the whodunit. He's the action that's doing all the things in creation. This is God's work to create man. And how does he create man? Out of the dirt. Out of the dust of the earth. By the way, free bonus, Hebrew lesson. First man's name was what? Nope, his name was Red. Literally, his name was red dirt or red clay. That's what the Hebrew word means. Now, I've already picked on Johnny so many times, I might as well keep on, huh? Can you imagine Johnny and I going around changing our names and say, hey, call me Dirt. I'll be Dirt and you can be Mud, or we'll trade, whichever one you want. To us, that seems funny, but here is God making this man out of the dirt, the dust, the mud of the earth. And that Hebrew word includes the word for clay or mud. And do you suppose Jesus got down on this earth? I don't know how he did it. I don't know the details of it. You suppose he just spit and made that little pile of dirt into mud and shaped that man? I don't know how it worked, but here is the Creator who did all those things, and watch what he does. When he had said this, verse 6, he spat on the ground and made clay out of his spit. And he applied the clay to the man's eyes. There is a medical condition in which people are literally born without the eyeball in the eye socket. We've known people that have gone blind, they take the eye out, it's diseased. I believe Jesus talked about that one time, didn't he? Getting rid of that eye rather than it infecting the whole body. For this man, is it a possibility, and the answer medically is yes, that he was literally one of those born without the eyeballs? Does he still have eyelids? Yes, they do. And generally, especially without the eyeball to kind of prop it open there, they're always closed. I mean, what's the point? If you're ever around people that are blind, do they open their eyes a lot? Not always. Behind those dark glasses, you'll find that they're not looking. They can't, so what's the point of it? I wonder, do you suppose that when Jesus makes clay and puts it on this man's eyes or in this man's eyes, that he's shaping two little eyeballs and replacing what's missing? I don't know. Maybe he just puts mud on eyes that have never been connected to the brain, that have never seen anything, no way of knowing what the defect is. But the result is that Jesus does just what he did once as the creator of mankind, and applies that to a man, and he sees again. Do we see the miracles with a sense of wonder and amazement? Wow. And that, quite honestly, is a part of John's point. He says, that's where he began this gospel. See Jesus as God and the power and authority that are his. And what he had just said is, while I'm in the world, I am the light of the world. Do you notice that? Verse 5? Do you remember what Jesus said to his disciples back there in the Sermon on the Mount about the light of the world? Who's the light of the world now that Jesus has left and gone back to heaven? You are the light of the world. Put those two statements together. Jesus says, hey, while I'm in this world, I'm the light of the world, but I've got to leave and go prepare that eternal home for you. Now you're the light. Jesus applies the clay to this man's eyes, John 9, verse 6, and then verse 7 tells him to go wash. And yeah, the comedian thinks that's funny. Yeah, this guy just put spit and mud on my eyes. I'm going to go wash it off. Whether the man thought that or not, what changes?
You can see now.
He went away and washed, and he came back seeing. Now, again, based on surgeons that have taken people who have never seen and allowed them to see again, do you know what happens after the surgery on those nerves and all? One, they're laid up in hospital for quite a long period of time. They have bandages on their eyes for weeks. And then the bandages finally come off and they have a little bit of sight. And then if they've been blind since birth, they say, none of this makes sense. What happens here? He went away and washed, and he came back seeing. And the neighbors who had previously seen him as a beggar are saying, yeah, it wasn't much of a miracle. He bumps into everything he walks into, and his eyes are dripping and pussy and everything. No. His friends and neighbors that have known him recognizes that he actually sees. You know, the whole point of this is don't cheapen the power of God. It's so easy to see the miracles that Jesus does as simplistic things. Anybody want to try it? What do you suppose would happen if, oh, now we can pick on Mark, he's here. What would happen if Mark, or we could pick on his son. What would happen if y'all spit on the ground, made a little mud, and put them on that mud balls on the eyes of someone that's born blind and never seen?
They'd just be dirty.
Then they have dirty eyes, and they still can't see. The power of God. This is, you know, this is meant to leave us with our jaws hanging. Wow, this is amazing. That's what his friends say. Is this not the one who used to sit and beg? And others were saying, verse 9, this is he. But others were saying, nope, it's just somebody that looks like him. You ever see somebody and mistake them for somebody else? Hey, that looks just like, oh wait, no it isn't. There's a fancy German word for it, doppelganger. A look-alike. And now they begin to ask him, said, okay. He says, no, I'm the one. I'm the one you know. And so they ask him, how then did you get eyes? How are your eyes opened? And he answered and said, the man who is called Jesus made clay and anointed my eyes and said to me, go to Siloam and wash. And I told him, says, hey, that's dirty and gross. I don't like Siloam pool. I'm going to go somewhere else and wash. Remember a story like that in the Old Testament? Guy had leprosy.
Amen.
And the prophet of God, who was who? Elisha. Yeah, it's easy to confuse those Elijah and Elishas, isn't it? Especially since so many of the things that they did were very similar. Elisha doesn't even leave the house when the man comes to him. Just sends his servant out. Oh, bonus. You anybody remember the servant's name? Gehazi. Gehazi. And the servant goes out and tells the man, go dip to get rid of his leprosy. Where?
River Jordan.
River Jordan.
7 times.
Apparently, River Jordan at that time is around flood stage. Why is that? Because other times of the year it's nice and relatively clear. But he goes and looks at the Jordan River and says, we got nice clean pools back home. Why should I get in this muddy water and dip? So it doesn't really matter. So he goes back home and washes in clean pools, and does he still have leprosy? He's going to die of it if that's what he does. In fact, that's what one of his servants argues. He says, hey, if he had told you to do something really difficult, you'd have done it. Go do a hula hoop for 5 hours. Go dig a ditch 10 feet deep. Go do something. But all he told you, remember what his servant told him?
He told you something simple, you'd have done it.
Why not wash and be clean? Exactly what I wonder, do you suppose Jesus recognizes that his words echo those around the event in Elisha's life? There's a lot of times, Jesus, he remembers those events. He knows those. This is God. He was there. Do you suppose he chuckles to himself and says, boy, you guys are dense. Why not just wash and be clean? And maybe you've heard some sermons today. I've heard preachers, comment says, hey, why is it that we will resist God's command for baptism? And we will argue. I bet if you check, there's probably a bug in that pool. Why would I want to be baptized where there's a bug? If a bug bothers you more than sin and dying without a chance of salvation, you got a problem, don't you? By the way, yes, I've baptized people in way worse things than that. And oddly enough, that was never the importance. We're saying to him, how then were your eyes opened? He answered and said, the man who is called Jesus made clay, anointed my eyes, and said to me, go to Siloam and wash. So I went away and washed, and I received sight. There's a lot more to the story, because they start pestering him and say, where is this Jesus? We want to see him. Sometimes people want to see Jesus, and I've had people say this over the years, if he'd just do one miracle for me, then I'd believe. How is it John ends this gospel? These things are written that you might believe, and in believing have life. Belief is not always about seeing. We're out of time for today, but I could easily have asked that neurosurgeon operating on my back and everything and all the spinal cord and everything that worked that he was going, he says, I want to see you do it first to somebody else. Make sure you're doing it right. I've seen surgery. Anybody want to let me operate on them? Yeah, no. Sometimes it's better left in the hands of the one who actually knows what it's doing. And is there any better one to know what he's doing than God? We'll pick up there next week. One more miracle. And by the way, if you think all these are amazing, as the guy says, you ain't seen nothing yet.